Duke Devlin may have one of the strangest careers in Yu-Gi-Oh! He enters the series like he is about to become a major rival. He is intelligent, confident, popular, stylish, and talented enough to invent his own game while still attending school. He arrives with a personal reason to hate Yugi, humiliates Joey in public, and challenges the king of games on unfamiliar territory. For 4 episodes, Duke feels important. After that, he joins the group and spends most of the series standing somewhere behind Tristan. That makes Duke easy to dismiss. He appears regularly, though the show rarely allows him to control the story again. He follows the group through Battle City, the virtual world, the conflict with darts, and the KC Grand Championship. He helps when needed, offers occasional commentary, and competes with Tristan for Serenity's attention. His introduction promises a character who could challenge the dominance of Duel Monsters itself. His later role turns him into another friend waiting beside the arena. Duke still matters because his introduction captures something the series gradually loses. Yu-Gi-Oh! Began as a story about games. Duel Monsters eventually consumed almost everything around it. Duke arrives carrying one final serious alternative. Dungeon Dice Monsters gives Yugi a new system to understand, a new board to navigate, and an opponent who already knows every rule. Duke is dangerous because Yugi cannot rely on years of card game experience. He has to prove that his talent belongs to him rather than the game that made him famous. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! Character essays like this. There are many characters in Duel Monsters who seem simple until you look at what the show was actually using them for, and Duke Devlin may be one of the clearest examples. Duke is introduced shortly after Duelist Kingdom, during a period when Yugi's reputation has changed dramatically. Yugi is no longer the quiet student nobody notices. He defeated Maximilian Pegasus and became known as the King of Games. That title attracts admiration, jealousy, and suspicion. Duke enters from the suspicious side. He created Dungeon Dice Monsters and submitted the game to Pegasus. Pegasus recognized its potential, played Duke himself, and planned to help release it commercially. The partnership gave Duke a realistic path towards success. He was not simply a teenager experimenting with dice in his bedroom. The creator of Duel Monsters had personally approved his work. That opportunity appeared to collapse after Pegasus lost to Yugi and was hospitalized. Duke concluded that Yugi must have cheated because he could not accept that anyone had defeated Pegasus fairly. In Duke's mind, Yugi had damaged the man who supported Dungeon Dice Monsters and placed Duke's future in danger. His revenge is personal, though it also comes from professional fear. Duke has built his entire identity around the game he created. Pegasus represents his chance to bring that game to the world. When Pegasus suddenly disappears from public life, Duke loses the person who gave his ambition legitimacy. Yugi becomes the easiest person to blame. This is important because Duke does not begin as an ordinary bully. He has evidence that his talent is real. He designed a functioning game complicated enough to interest Pegasus. He understands business, presentation, and strategy. His confidence has a foundation. The problem comes from how quickly that confidence becomes arrogance. Duke opens a game store near Yugi's grandfather's shop, giving himself both a business presence and a way to provoke Yugi. He transfers into Yugi's school and immediately attracts attention. Girls surround him. Joey becomes jealous. Duke barely needs to do anything before the rivalry begins. His appearance does much of the work. Duke dresses like someone who has already created a personal brand. His black clothing, dice earrings, and carefully arranged hair make him look more like a performer than a normal student. The dice theme appears everywhere because Duke understands that being recognized matters almost as much as being talented. Pegasus understands the same thing. Kaiba understands it too. Yu-Gi-Oh! Repeatedly connects success with theatrical presentation. A great player needs skill, though the people who become famous also create an image around themselves. Duke has already done that before meeting Yugi. He knows how to enter a room and make people look at him. He knows how to sell the idea that Dungeon Dice Monsters is exciting. Even his name in the English version sounds designed for a poster. Duke Devlin does not sound like a boy quietly hoping his game becomes successful. It sounds like the person who will be standing on the box. Joey dislikes him almost immediately. Part of this comes from Duke's popularity with girls, especially Taya and Serenity. Joey has spent the early series being mocked, underestimated, and treated like the least impressive member of Yugi's group. Duke arrives with everything Joey lacks. He is calm, fashionable, talented, and immediately respected. Joey challenges him to duel monsters. Duke accepts and defeats him. The duel is easy to forget because it happens before Duke's main battle with Yugi. It still tells us something important. Duke may be known for dungeon dice monsters, though he is also capable of playing duel monsters at a respectable level. He uses cards connected to dice, chance, and trickery, matching the identity he created around his original game. Joey enters emotionally and allows Duke to control the pace. After winning, Duke forces Joey to wear a dog costume and behave like his servant. The punishment is ridiculous, humiliating, and much more personal than the duel required. This is where Duke loses the audience's sympathy. He may have a reason to resent Yugi. Joey has nothing to do with Pegasus losing. Duke uses Joey because he wants Yugi to react. Joey becomes a prop in Duke's revenge and a public advertisement for Duke's superiority. Yugi challenges him to protect Joey. Duke refuses to face him in duel monsters. He chooses Dungeon Dice Monsters, the game he created, and understands better than anyone. If Yugi loses, he must give up duel monsters permanently. The demand attacks the foundation of Yugi's new identity. Duke wants to remove the King of Games from the game that gave him the title. The challenge is unfair by design. Yugi has never played Dungeon Dice Monsters. Duke designed every rule, every symbol, and every strategy. He knows which monsters are available and how the dungeon paths develop. Yugi has to learn while playing against the world's greatest expert. This should be Duke's perfect revenge. It becomes the reason he begins respecting Yugi. Dungeon Dice Monsters is one of the most creative games shown in Duel Monsters. Players roll special dice containing movement, summon, attack, defense, magic, and trap crests. When certain dice are successfully rolled, they unfold to create dungeon paths across the board. Monsters move along those paths toward the opponent's side, where the goal is to attack the opposing dungeon master 3 times. The system combines board game movement, resource management, monster combat, and luck. Every decision shapes the physical arena. A player cannot simply summon a monster and attack across an empty field. The dungeon must be built. Paths need to connect. Monsters need enough movement crests to advance. Offensive and defensive actions require the correct resources. A badly placed die can limit future options. This is Duke's world. He understands the game at a level Yugi cannot match through knowledge alone. He knows which dimensions will create useful paths and which monsters work together. He begins with confidence because he has played through these situations countless times. Yugi begins with confusion. The duel gradually reveals why Yugi became the king of games. His strength goes beyond memorizing duel monsters cards. He studies the rules, watches Duke's choices, and begins understanding the logic beneath the game. Yugi does not need to know everything immediately. He needs to learn faster than Duke expects. That is what makes the duel so important. Many of Yugi's greatest victories involve emotional bonds with his cards, the influence of ATEM or knowledge accumulated through earlier duels. Dungeon Dice Monsters removes most of those advantages. Yugi cannot build a familiar deck. He cannot depend on combinations he has practiced. He does not even know which creatures may emerge from the dice. He has to improvise. Duke watches Yugi make beginner mistakes and assumes those mistakes will continue. Yugi uses each one to understand another part of the system. By the time Duke recognizes the danger, Yugi has already begun turning Duke's own game against him. This is similar to the way Yugi defeats Pegasus. Pegasus possesses knowledge no ordinary duelist should have. The Millennium Eye allows him to read minds. He knows the cards he created better than anyone else. Yugi survives by adapting to an opponent who controls the environment. Duke sees Pegasus as unbeatable because Duke focuses on the advantage Pegasus held. He does not understand the kind of opponent Yugi becomes when placed at a disadvantage. Duke's signature monster in Dungeon Dice Monsters is Orgoth the Relentless. Orgoth perfectly matches Duke's style. It is powerful, visually dramatic, and tied to dice rolls that can increase its strength. The monster allows Duke's entire identity to appear on the board at once. Orgoth is the creation of a game designer who wants his strongest piece to feel exciting. The name also says everything. Orgoth is relentless because Duke believes pressure will eventually break Yugi. He keeps advancing, controlling the dungeon, and restricting Yugi's options. Yugi survives long enough to reach Duke's side of the board. He eventually uses Dark Magician, a monster Pegasus added to Dungeon Dice Monsters, and defeats Duke inside the game Duke designed. The connection to Pegasus matters. Duke believed Yugi dishonored Pegasus. One of the pieces associated with both Pegasus and Yugi becomes part of the victory that proves Yugi's legitimacy. Duke has no excuse left. Yugi did not know the rules beforehand. Duke controlled the game, the environment, and the conditions of the challenge. Cheating would have been almost impossible. Yugi wins through observation, adaptation, and risk. Duke accepts the result. This is the best part of his character. He does not become another Weevil Underwood. He does not destroy the board, deny the outcome, or search for a new way to hurt Yugi. Duke recognizes that his original belief was wrong. Yugi could have defeated Pegasus fairly, because Yugi has now defeated Duke under conditions designed to make victory impossible. Duke's entire opinion changes through the game. That is one of the purest Yu-Gi-Oh! Ideas in the series. Characters understand each other by playing. A duel reveals courage, cruelty, fear, intelligence, and loyalty. Words can be manipulated. A game forces decisions. Duke enters believing Yugi is a fraud. He leaves believing Yugi deserves his title. This immediate change also exposes the main problem the show faces with Duke afterward. His central conflict is resolved too cleanly. Kaiba can remain a rival because his disagreement with Yugi is deeper than a single misunderstanding. Kaiba rejects destiny, magic, and Yugi's entire philosophy. Joey can remain important because his development continues for the full series. Mai has insecurity, isolation, and ambition that survive individual tournaments. Duke's anger depends on one false belief. Once Yugi proves him wrong, the story has no second conflict prepared for him. Dungeon Dice Monsters also struggles to remain important after the introduction. Duke still wants to make the game successful, and the anime suggests Pegasus intends to continue supporting it. The idea never becomes a true competitor to Duel Monsters inside the series. This is almost unavoidable. The show is called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. The physical franchise is built around the card game. Dungeon Dice Monsters can receive a 4-episode introduction, a real-world toy line, and a video game, though it cannot replace the system carrying the entire franchise. Duke creates a good game inside a world that has already chosen its favorite. That leaves him in an awkward position. His greatest talent is game design. The story mostly follows duelists. Duke can play Duel Monsters, though he is never presented as an elite card player. His deck uses dice cards such as Strike Ninja, Dice Dungeon, Dimension Dice, and Summon Dice. The theme is entertaining and fits him well. It also feels like a secondary translation of his real identity. Duke's true ace is Orgoth the Relentless. His true battlefield is a dungeon built from unfolded dice. Every Duel Monsters appearance reminds us that he is participating in someone else's game. The Battle City arc gives Duke a reason to remain near the group. He travels with Tristan and Serenity while Joey competes in the tournament. This creates the recurring competition between Duke and Tristan over Serenity's attention. Duke enters that competition with a major advantage. He can speak to women without sounding like he has recently suffered a head injury. Tristan has known Joey and Yugi longer. He is physically brave and deeply loyal. His attempts to impress Serenity often become awkward or possessive. Duke behaves with more confidence, which naturally makes Tristan suspicious. Their rivalry gives both characters something to do while the main duelists compete. It rarely develops beyond comedy. Serenity is treated as the prize in a competition she never seriously agreed to enter. Duke flirts. Tristan becomes jealous. Joey threatens anyone who gets too close to his sister. The scenes fill time between duels and help maintain energy around the supporting cast. Duke's introduction suggested a much stronger dramatic role. The inventor capable of challenging Yugi in a completely different game becomes a handsome teenager arguing with Tristan. That decline begins quickly. During the virtual world arc, Duke is pulled into Noah Kaiba's digital world with the others. He is forced to duel alongside Tristan and Serenity against Nesbit, one of the Big Five. Duke contributes actual skill and strategic thinking, though the duel is remembered mainly for Tristan being turned into a robotic monkey. That is the kind of environment Duke now occupies. He remains useful. He is rarely central. The virtual world should theoretically fit him. Duke is a game designer trapped inside a constructed game system where rules can be manipulated. He understands strategy in alternate formats better than most of the group. The story could have allowed him to study Noah's system, identify weaknesses, or approach deck master rules from a designer's perspective. Kaiba and Yugi handle the larger questions. Duke plays his part and returns to the background. His involvement with the group still reveals something positive about him. Duke becomes loyal quickly. He began by humiliating Joey, yet once he accepts Yugi's legitimacy, he does not continue carrying resentment. He helps Joey, Tristan, and Serenity through dangerous situations and repeatedly remains with the group when leaving would be easier. Duke has no Millennium item. He has no ancient destiny. He is not related to anyone important. He stays because these people become his friends. That sounds ordinary beside a battle for the fate of the world. It gives him one of the healthier character changes in the show. Duke begins obsessed with his own reputation and the future of his game. After losing, he becomes capable of supporting people without needing to stand at the center. The show never gives this change much attention because Duke becomes quieter after joining the group. His behavior still demonstrates it. He risks himself during the virtual world crisis. He follows Yugi during the Waking the Dragons arc. He and Rebecca confront Valon while searching for answers after Yugi loses his soul. Duke participates even though the conflict has moved far beyond anything related to Dungeon Dice monsters. His life would be safer if he returned home and continued developing games. He repeatedly chooses to remain. Duke's friendship with Rebecca Hawkins is another underused part of his role. Rebecca is younger, louder, and more openly emotional. Duke often becomes the calmer presence beside her. During the Waking the Dragons arc, they travel together and support Yugi's group from outside the central trio of Yugi, Joey, and Kaiba. They make sense as a pairing because both enter the series as challengers who misunderstand Yugi. Rebecca believes Yugi's grandfather wrongfully took her grandfather's Blue Eyes White Dragon. Duke believes Yugi cheated against Pegasus. Both challenge Yugi, lose, and discover that the situation was more complicated than they assumed. Afterward, both become allies who remain slightly outside the original friendship circle. Yugi, Joey, Taya, and Tristan share a history that began before the main series. Duke and Rebecca join later. They can help, though the show rarely treats them as emotionally essential. Duke's presence during later arcs often works as proof that Yugi's influence extends beyond his oldest friends. Yugi defeats people without humiliating them. He gives them room to recognize their mistake and change direction. Duke begins by trying to destroy Yugi's reputation. He becomes one of the people willing to travel across the world for him. That says something about Yugi, and it says something about Duke's ability to admit he was wrong. Kaiba would probably rather launch himself into space than admit that clearly. Duke's later appearances also reveal a strange divide between status and relevance. Inside the world of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Duke should be extremely successful. He created a game while still young. Pegasus approved it. Industrial Illusions had plans to publish it. A commercial release could make Duke wealthy and internationally known. Among the main cast, this achievement receives surprisingly little attention. Joey wants to become a great duelist. Kaiba controls a massive corporation. Yugi carries an ancient pharaoh. Duke quietly created intellectual property. Depending on how well Dungeon Dice Monsters sells, Duke may have the most stable future of almost anyone standing beside Yugi. He is not risking his life for prize money or depending on tournament invitations. He owns the game. He can develop expansions, license monsters, and create new products. Even if Dungeon Dice Monsters never becomes larger than Duel Monsters, reaching the market through Industrial Illusions would still be an enormous accomplishment. Duke may lose relevance inside the show because the story follows Duel Monsters. Inside a realistic world, he has already succeeded. This makes him different from characters such as Rex Raptor and Weevil Underwood. Rex and Weevil depend entirely on their reputations as duelists. When they stop winning, their identities collapse. Duke can lose to Yugi and continue building something. His defeat confirms the quality of his opponent. It does not erase the fact that Duke invented the game. Yugi may be the better player. Duke created the board they were playing on. That achievement deserves more respect than the series gives it. Creating a balanced strategy game is difficult. Duke designs monsters, movement systems, resource symbols, dungeon construction, and combat rules that interact in a coherent way. The anime presents Dungeon Dice Monsters as a completed system rather than a rough experiment. Pegasus sees commercial potential because the game connects naturally to Duel Monsters while offering a different experience. Duke understands the appeal of Pegasus's monsters and transforms them into physical pieces moving through a dungeon. He takes something familiar and creates a new structure around it. That is creativity at the level the show usually reserves for Pegasus. Pegasus creates duel monsters by adapting creatures connected to ancient Egypt. Kaiba creates holographic systems that make the cards appear alive. Duke creates a separate game that turns monsters into pieces on an expanding board. All three contribute something to the way people experience games. Duke belongs in that conversation, even though the show gradually treats him like another spectator. His design as a character also fits the game he created. Dungeon Dice Monsters depends on chance, though skill determines how the player responds. A roll can provide useful symbols or leave the player without the resources they wanted. The player still chooses which dice to roll, where to place the dungeon path, and how to spend each crest. Duke enjoys presenting himself as effortless and controlled. His entire game contains uncertainty beneath that control. This explains why losing to Yugi affects him so deeply. Duke believes complete knowledge of the system should protect him. He designed every possibility. Yugi still discovers a path Duke did not expect. A creator can understand the rules and still be surprised by a player. That may be the strongest compliment Yugi gives Dungeon Dice Monsters. Yugi does not break the game to win. He uses its possibilities more creatively than Duke anticipated. The game is deep enough to allow a beginner to discover an original strategy. Duke wanted to prove Yugi was a fraud. Yugi proves Duke created something worth learning. The series could have built a much larger story from that relationship. Duke could have continued developing Dungeon Dice Monsters based on what Yugi taught him. Yugi could have tested new expansions. Joey could have learned the game and demanded a rematch. Kaiba could have viewed Dungeon Dice Monsters as a commercial rival or tried integrating it into Kaiba Land. Pegasus and Duke could have worked together after Pegasus recovered. Very little comes from any of it. Dungeon Dice Monsters becomes attached to Duke in the same way dinosaurs are attached to Rex or insects are attached to Weevil. It remains his theme rather than an evolving part of the world. This is where the demands of the franchise become visible. Duel Monsters cards could be sold continuously. Every anime duel introduced new monsters, spells, and traps that could later appear in physical sets. Dungeon Dice Monsters required different pieces, different rules, and a separate product line. The real version received a release, though it never approached the card game's popularity. The anime naturally returned its attention to the product audiences were already following. Duke becomes the human reminder of an expansion that never took over. His fading importance almost mirrors the real game he created. Dungeon Dice Monsters arrives with a major introduction, attracts attention, and offers a genuinely interesting alternative. Duel Monsters continues dominating the world around it. Duke remains visible mainly because he has become connected to the people at the center. By the KC Grand Championship, Duke is still accompanying the group, though he does not receive a meaningful tournament run. The arc introduces duelists from around the world, many of whom appear once and receive more competitive focus than Duke has received across several seasons. Duke should be ideal for that tournament. He is a game creator with international ambitions. Kaiba's event combines entertainment, business, and competition. Duke understands all three. The arc could have explored whether Dungeon Dice Monsters has become successful, whether Duke feels overshadowed by Kaiba and Pegasus, or whether he wants to prove himself as a Duel Monsters player. He mostly watches. This becomes Duke's permanent role. He is close enough to important events that the audience continues seeing him. He is rarely powerful enough to change them. That does not make him useless. Supporting characters help the world feel larger than the central rivalry between Yugi and Kaiba. Duke brings a different personality into the group. He is more relaxed than Tristan, less emotional than Joey, and more socially confident than Yugi. He can speak to strangers, understand commercial situations, and remain calm when other characters begin shouting. The problem comes from repetition. A useful supporting character still needs moments where their specific qualities matter. Duke's game design intelligence rarely solves a problem after his introduction. His business ambitions rarely affect the plot. His friendship with Yugi receives little private development. The show keeps Duke's appearance and removes the parts that made his appearance interesting. Orgoth the Relentless becomes especially symbolic of this. It is one of the most memorable monsters connected to a side character, though Duke rarely has the opportunity to use it because Dungeon Dice Monsters almost never returns. Imagine Kaiba owning Blue Eyes while only being allowed to duel once. That is roughly Duke's situation. His signature monster belongs to a game the story leaves behind. When Duke uses a Duel Monsters deck, the dice theme survives through cards such as Strike Ninja and dice-based effects. The cards reference his identity without giving him the full experience that identity was built around. He becomes an adaptation of himself. Even with all these missed opportunities, Duke remains likable after his introductory arc. He accepts his defeat, abandons his revenge, and never seriously betrays the group. His flirting with Serenity can become annoying, especially when paired with Tristan's jealousy, though Duke usually behaves with more awareness than the people around him. He also avoids the bitterness that consumes several other defeated rivals. Mai struggles with feeling ignored. Rex and Weevil become desperate for power. Kaiba turns every loss into fuel for another confrontation. Duke simply moves forward. That may make him less dramatic. It also suggests he has a stronger sense of self than the show initially implies. His game matters to him. Losing one match does not convince him that Dungeon Dice Monsters has no value. He learns that Yugi is legitimate and allows that knowledge to replace the grudge. Duke can separate his pride from reality once reality becomes undeniable. That is a rare skill in Yu-Gi-Oh! The series is filled with people willing to risk their souls before admitting that Yugi may be better than them. Duke requires one game. His original revenge still deserves criticism. He humiliates Joey, makes an unfair challenge, and risks taking Duel Monsters away from Yugi based on an assumption. His anger becomes cruel because he believes being wronged gives him permission to hurt people around Yugi. The quick change afterward works, because Duke's cruelty comes from arrogance rather than a desire to cause suffering. Once the arrogance breaks, the behavior loses its foundation. Weevil enjoys cheating. Merrick enjoys pain. Duke wants to prove a conclusion he has already accepted. When the game disproves it, he stops. This leaves Duke in a strange place within the series. He has one of the strongest introductory stories among the supporting cast and one of the weakest long-term developments. Mako Tsunami receives a short introduction, though his values and relationship with his father remain clear whenever he returns. My Valentine changes across multiple arcs. Becca grows from a child accusing Yugi into a reliable ally. Duke begins as an inventor, rival, and potential business figure. He becomes a traveling companion with dice earrings. His potential remains visible enough to make the loss frustrating. Duke could have represented the future of gaming beside Kaiba. Kaiba builds technology. Pegasus creates monsters and card systems. Duke designs alternate forms of play. Yugi proves the human element that makes those systems meaningful. Together, those characters could have shown 4 different sides of the same world. The series focuses almost entirely on Kaiba and Yugi. Duke remains outside the room where the future is being decided, yet his original duel still preserves the version of him that mattered. For those 4 episodes, Duke Devlin challenges the basic assumption that Duel Monsters is the only game capable of carrying Yu-Gi-Oh! The challenge fails commercially inside the franchise, though it succeeds creatively. Dungeon Dice Monsters feels different. The duel has a new rhythm. The board grows as the players make decisions. Monsters occupy physical space rather than simply appearing in attack or defense position. Movement matters. Routes matter. A die becomes part of the battlefield. Yugi's victory feels earned because viewers learned beside him. Duke makes that possible. He is the teacher, opponent, and creator at the same time. His arrogance gives the duel tension. His knowledge gives it credibility. His eventual respect gives it a satisfying ending. Duke Devlin never becomes a true replacement for Joey, Kaiba, or any of Yugi's central rivals. He never receives enough material for that. His role is more specific. He proves that Yugi is the king of games. That title can sound like another way of saying Yugi is the greatest Duel Monsters player. Duke forces the series to test the larger meaning. Yugi enters a game he has never played, faces its creator, and wins through his ability to understand systems, take risks, and remain calm under pressure. The title survives outside Duel Monsters. Duke loses his game and strengthens Yugi's legend. He also gains something from the loss. Before meeting Yugi, Duke has created a game and built a brand, though his pride remains fragile enough that another person's success feels like an attack on him. After the duel, he no longer needs to destroy Yugi to validate his own work. Dungeon Dice Monsters can be valuable even if Yugi is talented. Duke can admire the king of games without becoming less intelligent. That is the mature conclusion. The series rewards him by placing him in the background for the next 4 seasons. It is difficult to avoid laughing at that. Duke Devlin arrives looking like the newest major character in Yu-Gi-Oh! He defeats Joey, introduces an entirely new game, and nearly beats Yugi with a monster called Orgoth the Relentless. He has a connection to Pegasus, a commercial future, and enough confidence to compete with Kaiba in the category of dramatic entrances. A few episodes later, he is arguing with Tristan over who gets to stand closer to Serenity. That decline defines his reputation. Duke should still be remembered for what he brings into the series. He is a genuine creator in a world filled with players. He builds something rather than simply collecting stronger cards. He challenges Yugi on unfamiliar ground. He accepts the truth when he loses and becomes loyal without demanding constant recognition. His greatest weakness as a character belongs partly to the show. Yu-Gi-Oh! Introduces Duke as someone whose future exists beyond duel monsters, then places him inside a story where almost every future must pass through duel monsters. There is no natural position for him once Dungeon Dice Monsters is pushed aside. So Duke follows the group. He comments on duels. He helps during emergencies. He rolls dice whenever the show remembers that he owns them. The character never becomes what his introduction promises, though that introduction remains one of the clearest demonstrations of Yugi's true ability. Duke creates a game designed around strategy, probability, and spatial control. He knows every rule. Yugi learns while playing and finds a path the creator failed to see. Duke wanted to expose a false champion. He accidentally gave the champion a better test. That may be Duke Devlin's real contribution to Yu-Gi-Oh! He arrives believing Yugi's reputation destroyed his future. By the end of their game, Duke becomes one more person whose future changes because Yugi deserves that reputation. Duke does not lose his game when Yugi defeats him. He finally sees what the game can become when the right person plays it.